Hey guys, thanks for coming out here for part 2 of The Power of Yin and Yang. This episode jumps off the information from part 1 discussing how Yin and Yang create life. After life is created, Yin and Yang have this fascinating ability to help predict the future. In the next episode, part 3 of The Power of Yin and Yang theory, I'll give you some ideas of how to apply this to your health. Before I get started, I want to go over my general disclaimer that all the information in this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Life is an ever-repeating pattern, cycles of time. The Tai Chi symbol represents the cycles of life and the recycling nature of the world. It shows that Yin and Yang travel through time in a consistent and predictable pattern. Nature gives the best examples of cyclical patterns that follow predictable paths. You know, the 4 seasons flow in only one direction. One season follows the other in a never-ending succession. The order of the seasons never changes. The seasons create a framework that contain life. And the framework for seasons would go something like this. Spring is filled with new births and new lives. Summer relaxes in the warmth and the ripening of the fields, while fall is a time to harvest and the weather begins to cool. Winter, the fields rest and fall asleep, only to prepare to awaken next spring. So each step of the life cycle is responsible for different events, yet all these events are necessary to ensure the future health of the earth. Not one season is more important than the other. So to miss or weaken one season is going to impact all future seasons unless you change something. Now, I go into this concept in more depth in my book, Caregiver Survival Guide, How to Eliminate Stress in 30 Minutes with Chinese Medicine and Other Useful Tools. I'll put a link in the video description below. Now, this concept of time and yin and yang is cyclical. So you could say a year is a cycle. And at the end of each year, you could review your life and determine how the next year will go. Suppose you spent most of the year supporting your health. In that case, you can imagine you are starting the following year healthier and better able to participate in your life. And it's not just your health. It can be your job, your hobby, anything. Hey, let me take a quick pause. If you find this episode interesting, educational, or if it helps you in any way, click the subscribe button and notification bell right now. There are so many people out here. If you don't do it now, you're never going to find me again. Cycles can be much smaller than a year. A day is a cycle represented by the opposites, night and day. Then there's larger cycles. Classical Chinese medicine had a 60-year cycle, almost a lifetime. In ancient China, the 60-year cycle was used to record time. The current 60-year cycle ends in 2043, and we're about 2/3 of the way through it. Yet, cycles can be much bigger than 60 years. Here's a bigger cycle. Precession is the wobble of the Earth's rotation as it travels around the sun. The rotational wobble is like the wobble of a spinning top. It takes about 26,000 years for the planet to complete a circuit of precession. The halfway point is believed to mark a significant change in the world. And the last time precession changed its energetics, the Earth experienced the end of an ice age and massive melting of ice caps. It also marked the start of a Yang cycle. So within the next 10 to 20 years, precession will have made it to the midway point, marking a shift in polarity and the beginning of a yin cycle. And endings in yin and yang theory, cyclical endings, do not happen like the turning off of a light switch. Now the light's on, and the next second, it's off, and nothing else happens. Endings in yin and yang theory are more like a swing. You start swinging on a swing set and pick up steam. As you get higher and higher, the force and excitement increase. You feel yourself swing forward and reach the apex of the forward movement and start falling backwards. That is the ending in Yin and Yang theory. It's reaching an apex, feeling the pause, and slowly reversing direction. The darkest night happens at midnight, not at 5 in the morning. The change in the theory of Yin and Yang mark the pause and the darkest or brightest point. The pause marks the shift in polarity, so midnight marks a change of movement from a Yin direction to a Yang direction. Yang slowly builds up force until it exhausts itself around midday. Once again, the polarity pauses the current path and then reverses. But that pause at noon marks the shift from Yang to Yin. From that moment forward, the light will slowly wane until it reaches its apex at midnight. So, based on the predictability of movement and the ability to assess the current cycle's impact on future cycles, ancient China used the theory of Yin and Yang to develop such forecasting tools as the I Ching. And the goal was to help determine what may happen in the future and help determine a course of action. This part of the theory is fascinating when you look at it from where we stand. The chaos today and the sense that time is speeding up have people wondering. So the question becomes, how does Yin and Yang help predict potential future outcomes? Cycles are the framework of the theory. So each cycle is either predominantly Yin or Yang. And as the cycle reaches its apex, the expression will be the most Yin or Yang expression. Then there's this pause and the energy shifts and it starts reversing its direction, becoming more and more Yin. Today, there are two significant cycles closing, the 60-year cycle and the midpoint of precession. Because these two cycles are ending together, whatever the end is, it's more emphasized because more than one major cycle is ending. And one of the cycles is a massive cycle, which I'll talk about in a minute. If you think about the 60-year cycle, it started in 1984. The United States was facing the end of the rapid economic expansion that marked the industrial age and the end of the war. And the economy was shifting to a service and technology economy. Okay, so the midpoint of the precession cycle marks a change in energy. This one is the change of the Yang energy to Yin energy. And the last time energy changed was 12,000 years ago. Okay, so it's a Yang ending, and part one talked about how Yang expresses itself as it gets more and more Yang physically. The more Yang something is, the more compact and compressed it is, and that may be the reason there's this feeling of time speeding up. Along with time feeling faster, there is this conflict of wanting to continue to have this luxurious life versus becoming more aware that we need to change how we're interacting with the world. And from the last election, it was about 50-50 with the need for people believing that we had to change how we're interacting with the world slowly increasing. And okay, let's be real. Over the next 10 to 20 years, the need to be more conscious of our environment will grow and win out because the next generations are more focused on those efforts. Cycles could end quietly or with a bang, depending on the energetics of the previous cycles. Well, this cycle is ending with a bang, and it's not over. There's probably another 20 or more years to this ending. When I went to school, way back in the day, like when dirt was created, only 1 or 2 people had any self-sustaining practices, and today the numbers are increasing, and it doesn't appear the concept of tiny homes and minimalism is a fad. It seems to be more a mark of change in the energetics of the planet. Maybe if this was happening back in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, I would say it's a fad, but it's happening now as we are coming to the end of a yang phase. The important thing is the energetics of the previous cycle lays the foundation for the start of the next cycle, and an easy way to think about this is education. So I'm going to use myself as an example. When I started high school, I wasn't well prepared and didn't have the discipline to study. So already I'm entering with a weakness going into this next phase. And in my algebra class, I seriously didn't put in any effort. So by the end of the first quarter, I realized I hadn't learned the basic skills needed to progress to the next quarter. I was going to fail in the next quarter without change. The weakness I had entered high school with set me up to fail by the second quarter. Now, like everything in life, everything can have a different outcome. From a yin and yang perspective, the cycle ending was a very weak cycle, and it wasn't going to be strong enough to support the next cycle. So I could either accept that outcome and fail or do something different. I decided to do something different, and I changed. I got tutoring. I got a different instructor. I had to change some of my friendship. These were huge changes I had to make because I had ended the previous cycle so poorly. So these concepts work with your health also. And in the next episode, I'll talk about how yin and yang work in your health and help determine changes you can make to improve your health. So in this episode, we covered how yin and yang represents cycles in time, and these cycles are predictable. The ending of one cycle creates the foundation for the next cycle, and understanding where you are in the cycle and the strength and weaknesses from the previous cycle, you can predict what will happen in the next cycle if you change nothing. So if that prediction doesn't look too hot, the theory also helps you identify what changes you can make to improve your outcome. Okay, guys, so that's a little bit of the width and depth of the theory of yin and yang. Next episode, we're going to start applying it to your health, help you figure out what changes you can make to improve your health. And until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.